This is a CBS News special report. I'm Jeff Glor in New York, and we are following an awful situation in Paris at this hour. The historic Notre Dame Cathedral is burning. The spire has collapsed. Flames burst through the roof just a short time ago. We've been watching this giant plume of smoke that can be seen all over Paris. The Notre Dame Cathedral, which dates to the 12th century, is one of the most visited landmarks in Paris. Millions visits every year, and now those who are there today have been watching this scene unfold. Once again, the Notre Dame Cathedral on fire. Part of it has collapsed in Paris. Our Elaine Cobb is in Paris at this hour. Elaine, what do we know?
Jeff, the fire took hold really rapidly. The first flames soon developed into a massive blaze. The wooden structure of the roof is what has helped it go down so quickly. And the steeple, the spire, has just collapsed. There's 13th century wood in there. And as well, the cathedral has been under renovation. So a lot of materials and a lot of equipment relating to that in the church as well. And there have been some suggestions that it may have contributed to the blaze. At this stage, the firefighters say they do not know what caused it. They are trying to contain the fire, but at this stage, it looks like the fire is winning.
It certainly does. Unfortunately, Notre Dame was undergoing a €6 million or $6.8 million renovation project, as you mentioned, Elaine, in part there. And because a lot of this wood and a lot of the material is so old, it's certainly presenting more challenges for firefighters as we watch this scene continue to unfold. Elaine, what do we know right now about who may or may not have been in the cathedral at the time?
It's unclear at this stage if there was anybody inside. It is quite likely that there were workers inside involved in the renovations. There are usually visitors also within the church itself. They would have been evacuated right away, though.
All right, let's also keep in mind that this fire comes at the beginning of Holy Week. We're not seeing any water. Elaine, I'm not sure exactly what images you're looking at right now, but not seeing water being poured onto these flames right now, which does not appear to have gotten any better at all. And we mentioned that giant plume of smoke, which can be seen all over Paris at this hour. Elaine, you live there. Talk a little bit about the area and the neighborhood and the construction that's been ongoing there.
Jeff, the cathedral is in the heart of Paris, both literally and figuratively. It's on the island, the Ile de la Cité, right in the center, and it attracts millions of visitors, but it's also a very special symbol for Parisians. You can see the spire, or you used to be able to, and it's also exactly where point zero for France is, right in front of the cathedral. It's where everything is measured to the rest of the country. Now, it's in a very built-up area because it's residential. It's the heart of Paris. There are cafes and restaurants that will have made it very difficult for the firefighters to get near. Is that why they haven't been using water yet? That's unclear. They have been trying to put up ladders to get higher and high enough, but with the blaze taking over so much of the building so quickly, they may be just afraid to go too near.
Look at these pictures. So you've been re-racking this. You've been looking at the terrible to look at the spire as it collapsed there on Notre Dame. This happened just a short time ago. No effort, or at least no progress as far as we can tell, in containing this fire. But Elaine, talk more about the construction that's going on right now, or that has been going on.
Well, Notre Dame has been crumbling of late, and part of that problem is that there are so many organizations involved in running and the upkeep of the cathedral. And we talked to them last year, and they said, you know, we need a fortune to get this back to the state it needs to be. There were gargoyles and statues falling off the back of the cathedral. They wanted to rebuild part of the inside, to rework a lot of the stone, the flying buttresses, many of them are gone. If you look up at Notre Dame, you couldn't necessarily tell, but in fact, some of what looked like it was still a stone parapet was in fact just wood made to look like the stone, filling in the gaps. So an awful lot of work underway, and they had been looking for funds in the US as well, appealing to friends of Notre Dame and people who love historical monuments and would help. So the work was, as I said, just this week, they took down the statues that climb up the spire in order to renovate them and to work on the spire. But now, of course, that won't be necessary.
Unfortunately so. Elaine, stand by. We are getting word now in from police. They are saying at this point, no deaths. So that would indicate that somebody cleared out either as this was happening or no one was inside when this actually started. The cause at this hour unknown. But to reset what you're looking at here, we've been watching these pictures now roll in for just a little over an hour now. Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The iconic cathedral is burning at this hour. The spire has collapsed. Mikey K joins us now on the phone. He is there. Mikey, tell us what you're seeing and hearing.
I've just been covering the area for the last 35 minutes. When I got down to the north side of the Seine, which is known as the right bank, I was about 200 meters away. And I basically saw the 300-foot spire that was engulfed in flames. As I was speaking to one of your producers, when they were asking me what I could see, I said the 300-foot spire was engulfed, but I didn't know how long the structure or the integrity of the structure would be able to hold, given that it had been burning for at least 30 minutes. And then literally as I came on air with you, the spire, the 300-foot spire, collapsed right in front of me. And that's the spire that sits behind the two square structures that are almost as high. I think they're almost 250 feet. But they're the ones that are synonymous with Notre Dame Cathedral. When you look at it from the front, you see the two big square structures in front of you, and then there's the spire behind. Since that report, I've walked down, and I'm now literally just north of Pont d'Arcole. That is a bridge which crosses to the island that Notre Dame is on. It has been cordoned off by police. There are thousands and thousands of observers, of tourists, of locals. It is rush hour. It's just past 8 o'clock local time in Paris. And now I can see the back end of the spire. So if you imagine the two big square structures at the front of the cathedral, then to the rear of the cathedral you have effectively the main infrastructure where you would walk into the cathedral and you would pray and you would see all of the the beautiful French Gothic architecture. That now is still up in flames. The flames are as intense as they were when I arrived 35 to 40 minutes ago. The spire has now gone, and I can now effectively see flames which are around 200 feet high, and the remnants of what looks like the final components of the infrastructure of Notre Dame Cathedral. There is literally nothing left apart from the skeleton at the back end. The two main structures, the big square structures that extend up to around 200, 250 feet, they remain intact at the moment. But the blaze is, because of about a 10 to 15 knot wind, the blaze is pushing the heat, the flames and the smoke over the two big square structures. But at the moment, they look fairly intact.
So those structures remain intact, but the roof has in fact collapsed. Mikey, from what you can tell, what are firefighters doing?
Unfortunately, from my standpoint, the cathedral sits just behind what looks like government buildings and what looks like residential buildings, and they're fairly tall. They're about 100 feet high. So all I can see effectively is the top of the very top of the cathedral and about the top 75 feet of the two square structures. So basically, I can't really see much of the firefighting capability that the French firefighters are doing. But what I can see is pretty much that the French police have responded pretty rapidly and have cordoned off the entire area out to what looks like about 100 meters. So effectively, I think the police cordon extends out to, and as I'm watching now, literally there is 200, 250 foot flames bellowing from the cathedral. Some of the flames literally extending up to 50 feet from the top of what was the roof, the cloud filling the Parisian sky and the sunset as well, which was a beautiful sunset until the fire happened about an hour ago.
Mikey K, stand by if you would for us. We really appreciate the information there. We also have Ian Lee with us. He's a CBS correspondent in London to talk more about what's happening, what we're watching, these pictures unfolding here in Paris at this hour. Ian, talk about, this was the project at Notre Dame. It was a big one. It was a delicate one, and as we're seeing now, a dangerous one as well.
Yeah, that's right. This is a $6.8 million renovation project that has been underway for quite some time to really fix up the structure of Notre Dame. And we're hearing that possibly this fire was started from that work, although firefighters right now aren't confirming the cause of this blaze. But there's a lot of valuable, priceless artwork that is inside that cathedral. And what we're hearing right now is firefighters are working hard to try to save as much of that as possible. I mean, this is really an icon of Paris, and every moment that goes by, this fire is spreading. And so while they try to stop that fire, they're trying to save what they can, the history of Paris. This is a building that is 800 years old, and so you have all of that, but you do have a lot of that ancient wood that's inside, and that's really what's causing this fire to take hold and spread. That roof is collapsing, so it is also very dangerous for these firefighters to go inside and operate, because you do have falling debris from that roof from other areas. And so while they are fighting to put this out, they're also got to be worried about their own safety as they go in and try to save what they can while they're trying to put out this fire. We're also hearing from the French president. He's put a message out on Twitter, and he said, "I'm sad tonight to see this part of all of us burn." And it just shows you how iconic Notre Dame is, not just for the people of Paris, but really the world. It is the most visited site in Paris. 13 million tourists a year go there. And this is a place that was also getting ready for Easter weekend that's coming up. So it was preparing for celebration, but tonight we're seeing this disaster unfold.
Disaster indeed. All right, Ian, thanks very much. Elaine Cobb is in. Look at, there's the. So this is the Spire. Immediately, what you're looking at right now is the Spire immediately before it collapsed. So the Spire at Notre Dame is gone, fell down. The roof collapsed as we hit getting close to sunset here in Paris. It's just after 8 o'clock in Paris as firefighters continue their response. Elaine Cobb is in Paris as well. Elaine, you're getting some new information here. What are you hearing?
A church spokesman has just told French media that all of Notre Dame Cathedral's frame is now burning after the spire collapsed and after most of the roof has collapsed. So that would be the entire interior in flames, because, of course, while the exterior is stone, there is so much wood in there that it would all go up so quickly.
Ian was talking about that too, the priceless works of art. Elaine, I wonder, do you know anything about what was done to secure those, or before this construction project began?
Well, the construction project has been making every effort to not interfere with the day-to-day workings of the church, with masses, with visits. So a lot of the artwork was still there. They were working piece by piece on different areas of the church, so only moving what was needed so that it wouldn't interfere with the pleasure for people coming to visit it. And so there would have been still an awful lot inside, and firefighters have been trying to get some of them out. Crowds of people gathered in the area in front of the cathedral. All of them have been staring in horror as the fire took hold and as the spire collapsed. Police have been moving them farther and farther back because, of course, it's very dangerous, and there are concerns now about buildings nearby. There are apartment blocks and restaurants and cafes just across the street from the church. And so while one side has the river and gardens, the other side is literally a narrow street away from other buildings, so a lot of concern about that. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron is on his way to the church. He's already tweeted about his sorrow at losing a part of France's history. He was due to address the nation tonight about social issues and the Yellow Vest protests. He has now cancelled that, and this, of course, taking over everything here at the moment.
Elaine, you bring up a very interesting point there, the fact that there are restaurants and so many other shops nearby, and one of our eyewitnesses talked about how the wind is blowing at a significant clip there in Paris this evening, which is helping to fan those flames, and we hope not carry those flames to any other nearby structures. You are seeing the water being poured on it now, which we weren't seeing for a while. So firefighters are keeping a decent distance there, but at least getting some water on Notre Dame Cathedral right now. We've just seen a tweet from the First Lady. We mentioned the tweet from the French President, Emmanuel Macron. He said earlier, "I'm sad tonight to see this part of all of us burn." This is what the First Lady just said. "My heart breaks for the people of Paris after seeing the fire at Notre Dame Cathedral, praying for everyone's safety." Elaine, take us back into the geography and the street set up there, and where people are being taken to and into the neighborhood there, and what concerns firefighters are continuing to deal with right now.
Well, it's a very crowded area right at the heart of Paris. The Ile de la Cité is one of the two islands where Paris first began, where this city was born. And Notre Dame has been at the heart of it for hundreds of years. And so right in there are cafes, there are restaurants, there are homes. A lot of people live around there. It's obviously very popular and very wealthy real estate, but it's also in between, it's in the River Seine, so you've got the river on the back and at one side, and on the other side you have just a narrow street separating the church from buildings, from cafes, from restaurants. In front of it there is that big square which is kept empty, of buildings, of vendors. It is where people queue to get in. It is where people stand to take photographs. It's where people find themselves on that spot that marks the center of France, from which all distances are measured. And it's an area that people go to just to contemplate and be peaceful. And it's an area they go to say, "I have been to Notre Dame, to the heart of Paris, and here's my photo from it." And it is a piece of French cultural life that is disappearing before everyone dies.
And there was a determination, Elaine, to keep it open as much as possible while all this construction and renovation was going on.
Yes, there was a very concerted effort to ensure that people could still enjoy the cathedral, enjoy the artworks, could still go to Mass there, could still go to the various services. And of course, with Easter week, this is a very special week for Notre Dame, and it would have had many people planning a trip here this week, and people already going for prayers. So a lot of people there. The crowds who were evacuated from the area are still nearby trying to see what's happening, but they've been moved back more than a street at this stage in order to keep it safe. Now, the junior interior minister says there have been no injuries at this stage reported from the fire. And the Paris prosecutor's office says it has started an inquiry into the fire. That's not to suggest it was started deliberately, but just that they have to work out exactly what happened.
Elaine, thank you very much. Again, stay with us. This fire at Notre Dame Cathedral does come, as you mentioned, at the beginning of Holy Week, when more people presumably would have been visiting Notre Dame Cathedral. Are those firefighters, it appears, there trying to get closer and trying to get some water on these flames, which have continued, at this point, taken down the spire of Notre Dame, collapsed the roof of Notre Dame, and we are getting some sobering messages coming in from officials on the scene in Paris. Notre Dame spokesman André Finot told French media, quote, "Everything is burning. Nothing will remain from the frame." Police are warning people in Paris to stay away from the area around the cathedral. The concern for those firefighters in shops, restaurants, everything else near the cathedral remains, that the flames could potentially spread on this evening, so they have to protect themselves. They also have to protect nearby property and lives. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, described it as, quote, "a terrible fire," and she is also urging people to respect the boundaries set up by fire crews to ensure that everyone remains safe. The good news at this hour, what we've been told by police at this point, is that no one has died here, and they say right now they have no reports of injuries after this fire started at Notre Dame Cathedral, even though it has been terribly destructive, and the history that has been taken down here in the span of just a couple hours here this afternoon, our time, evening, Paris time, as we're just past 8 o'clock. Ian Lee remains in our London bureau. Ian, what are you hearing?
Yeah, it really is that latest information we're hearing from the church spokesman that, sadly, nothing they expect is likely to remain, at least nothing that isn't stone. You can see that frame there, the tall towers, stone towers, those haven't been affected yet, or it doesn't look like it, but the rest of the building has been completely destroyed. You see that skeleton really of the roof, that is all that is left. And again, quite fortunate so far that no deaths have been reported, no injuries have been reported. Also, firefighters are going to be very careful because this is a very tall building, and when you have this kind of situation, it can make it quite unstable, and so they will be moving carefully. The one thing, too, that we're going to be following closely are these priceless works of art. And that's what we've also heard from officials are this building was packed with statues, with paintings, with stained glass. They had the largest rose stained glass, about 10 meters big. It was the largest one ever built at that time. Stained glass is quite fragile, though, so it's likely that any sort of flame and heat could destroy that very quickly. You also have the statues of the 28 kings of Israel that was also in that building. These are all things that, once these flames are under control, that they're going to take stock of to see what has survived. Hundreds of years of history crammed in that building. We have to go back to the 12th century when it was started construction. Napoleon Bonaparte was crowned emperor in that building. There's a lot of history connected to it, and tonight, as we look at these pictures, a lot of that history is now in the ashes there of Notre Dame.
Right, when looking at those images, it's hard to imagine, at least in parts of it, that any of that artwork could survive following what we've seen here. Again, what we are hearing from police is that they're saying at this hour no injuries and no deaths resulting from this devastating fire. As you see a helicopter there above the scene over Notre Dame. This is, guys, are these live? We're looking at live pictures right now. So again, part of the structure does remain intact. You can see where they were doing the renovation work. I think we still have some of the video from earlier where we saw both the spire come down and other parts of the roof come down at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. As we come up on 8:30 now, there it is, 8:30 Paris time, a firefighting operation that will no doubt go on well into the night, if not for days now, as police continue and firefighters continue to do their work at Notre Dame Cathedral. But to reset, again, these are images from earlier. It hasn't appeared as though firefighters have been able to make much progress. Part of that's because they haven't been able to get very close to it. We have seen now some water being poured onto Notre Dame Cathedral as the fire just continues to burn there. They have that a cordon set off, so they're trying to keep people as safe as possible, and people in Paris, the mayor in Paris is asking people to stay as far back as possible. I think we have another We have another eyewitness, actually a CBS employee on the scene, Dennis Wilkins. Dennis, are you with us?
I am.
Dennis, where are you and what are you seeing?
I'm on a hilltop in the Latin Quarter near the Pantheon at the intersection of Rue Con and I'm at a cafe with my family, and we're looking on the burning still now of Notre Dame, where we had spent yesterday. And the steeple was still standing when we arrived on the block, and in flames. It went from white into a kind of a golden hue, and there were black clouds as well. And it burned and burned, and there was a stunned disbelief, and then it turned to utter sadness. We had crowds around me. The Pantheon is behind me, people crying, and we watched the steeple fall. It was just incredibly tragic, and it's an amazing scene. It's very emotional here. People are very upset. People are, of course, have their cell phones up and filming this, but it's a state of shock here. It's quite amazing.
I can only imagine what it's like watching there in person. We know what we're seeing on television here, and it has been awful to watch. And we are now hearing that the cathedral sits on an island. Police are now telling us that that entire island is being evacuated. One would presume that we don't know whether that involves firefighters or not. If it did, that would set them back even further. But look at the pictures that we've seen. Can we go back to that wide view if we could for a moment, please? This is what you're looking at tonight. If you're living in Paris or if you're visiting Paris, smoke consuming the sky, one of the world's most famous buildings that is so meaningful to so many, burning. The roof of Notre Dame has collapsed, the spire has collapsed, and firefighters are doing anything they can to prevent any further damage. Notre Dame Cathedral, again, was under a $6 million renovation. That's been taking place for some time now, and as Elaine Cobb, who's on the scene there in Paris, has noted ably, that they've tried to keep normal traffic going throughout the cathedral as this construction project has taken place. A very delicate and very difficult one, because you're talking about parts of the cathedral, the wood, other pieces of it being 800 years old. And that's what they've been trying to update. As we rejoin Elaine Cobb and as the president of France arrives on the scene, Elaine?
Yes, Emmanuel Macron has now arrived at Notre Dame Cathedral. He's accompanied by the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe. They are making their way to nearer the scene, or as near as they can safely get, because, of course, the danger is of the church collapsing onto people or onto nearby buildings. So we're hearing the entire Ile de la Cité, that entire island, is being evacuated at the moment by police and by firefighters, because they are concerned of the fire spreading rapidly if it takes hold of anywhere beside the cathedral.
So Ile de la Cité, talk about that, Elaine. If that is, and in fact it is being evacuated, how many buildings, how many shops, how many people, how many blocks are we talking about?
Well, the Ile de la Cité has, in fact, a church. The courthouse is just across the road. It, however, is far enough that it should be all right. But there's a hospital just beside the church. It's just one block over, and they are being evacuated. They're also right beside it. There are narrow streets with a lot of restaurants and cafes and souvenir shops, and all of that has been cleared. They're trying to get everybody out of the apartment buildings there. They're all very old buildings, so there will be a lot of wood, a lot of old stone, and because they're all packed in on top of each other, the fear is that if the fire jumped across the very narrow street, that it could start a major blaze in several of those buildings, buildings which are home to people who live there all year round, as well as to the cafes and restaurants that people visit when they are visiting Paris.
Elaine, when was this construction project supposed to be finished?
It was due to be finished sometime later this year or next year, but it was something that it took some delays already. So they were looking for 70 million for the urgent renovations and had hoped, in fact, to then go on and do some other works if they had managed to get any more funding. But the urgent renovations were due to wrap up later this year or next year on this 12th century cathedral that hadn't seen any major renovation in some time. And that's why they said it really needed the work. It really had to be done very quickly. They had said that the initial repairs were urgent because it was literally falling apart with pieces of stone falling off. And at the back of the cathedral, they have what they've called the graveyard, which is where the pieces of stonework, where gargoyles, where statues are all stored that have fallen off the building.
As you point out, it was crumbling. Anybody who visited Paris could easily see that. But this has been a big point of discussion in Paris for quite some time, Elaine, about what to do about Notre Dame and how to fix it.
Absolutely. And part of the issue has been that the cathedral is there are several organizations involved. It is part of the church, but it is also part of the city. And the French government had pledged to cover 50 million euros of the cost of repairs, but the church said they needed to raise really 150 million more over 10 years. And they had been hoping to really get to work on it and fix it, which they have been doing, to get the urgent stuff out of the way. But they have said, that was still only going to make sure it was just all right. The whole effort involved a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, including France's National Monuments Body, and also appeals to private individuals, including in the U.S., hoping to get people who love Paris, who love Notre Dame of Paris, to actually give some money and help in those vital repairs.
And Elaine, talk about the cathedral living there. Talk about the cathedral itself, the structure, and what people are seeing right now, the buildings and the island itself.
Well, what they're seeing right now is just flames. We've been told that the entire structure is on fire. It's not just the roof, it is the entire church. Don't forget, as well as the wood in the structure itself, there are all the wooden pews. There is the wood involved in there are wall hangings, there are separation areas, where the choir sits, all of that is wooden. There is just so much wood in there to go on fire. There are also tapestries and artworks, and it's just highly flammable. The church itself it's a thing of beauty, or was, and people would visit. It was always on people's lists of things to see in Paris because it's at the heart of the city, both geographically and emotionally. It's where people would gather. It's where people go to pray. It's where people who don't even go to pray would visit the church on Easter week or around Christmas for carol singing, for services, and it's a place that's always been very special to people, and it's known around the world, whether it's those who loved Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame, or if it's people who love architecture because of its very pure Gothic architecture. It's been such a huge part of Paris and indeed of France, and there are a lot of emotional responses and tweets out at the moment, not just from politicians and mayors and dignitaries, but from ordinary French people who can't believe that this famous landmark in Paris is crumbling away before everyone's eyes, and that spire that stands so tall, even though it's in the lowest part of the city that is a bowl, but it was visible from pretty much everywhere. And so to think that will no longer be visible, it's just tearing people apart here. It's breaking their hearts.
All right, Elaine, thank you. No one forgets the first thing, myself included, the first time they saw Notre Dame, and to see it burn is difficult to watch. Even more difficult for those on the scene, including Victoria Woodall, who's a reporter with our station in Philadelphia, KYW. Victoria, where are you, and what are you seeing from your position?
Hi, Jeff. Well, right now, I've been staying in the Latin Quarter on vacation, and we are on the balcony of an Airbnb that we're staying at. And what we're looking at right now is if we were facing the Notre Dame, we would be on the right-hand side of the bell tower, on the other side of the Seine. And I think what's so emotional right now is I can hear people in the streets singing. They're singing and praying and watching this billowing fire continue to persist, and now within the belly of the church. This has been going on for a few hours now, at least 2 hours. My husband and I, we were walking around this beautiful city, and we see this billowing of yellow, dark smoke, and we're like, what could that possibly be? We start moving more towards the direction of our area in the Latin Quarter of where we are, and we see it is the Notre Dame in flames. It looked like it started on the back end. It still has not reached those bell towers, but what we've been watching is the emergency teams trying their best to put this fire out, but the wind is also very serious, and I think that's what continues to be so disheartening because they're fighting so hard. But the wind is one obstacle that is for sure working against them. But it's extremely disheartening, Jeff. I mean, the crowds in the street, they are glued to what they're watching. The singing in the street they're songs of prayer. I don't think anyone around the world can imagine what we're seeing before us right now. It's unbelievably disheartening, Jeff. Unbelievable.
Well, we get one sense of it here watching on television, but it's a completely different one being there and hearing what you're saying about what people are doing right now. That singing on the streets, that praying, that hoping that something changes here after this awful afternoon in Paris. Tony Headley is also there. Tony, are you watching the work that firefighters are able to do right now? Let's try again. Tony Headley, are you with us?
Hi,
Okay.
I'm standing on l'Île Saint-Louis, which is right across from l'Île de la Cité, where Notre Dame is still in flames. Firemen on the top of tall trucks, tall ladders, are dousing the fire, which is at the furthest eastern end of Notre Dame, which is in the center of Paris. Thousands of people are standing by in shock. They're not making much noise. The only noise you can hear is that of the firemen's trucks and sirens arriving. I asked one of the bystanders, and he explained to me that this was the loss of a symbol of Christianity in Europe. And although it might be rebuilt, this is what we were witnessing as we speak.
Tony, talk about the work that is. I know the entire island now has been cleared out. Does it look as though people are still leaving, and how far back are they keeping people right now?
New York, can you hear me?
Yes, Tony, we hear you. Go ahead.
New York, can you hear me?
Okay. Guys, there's some connection issues there, I think. So I'd like to go back to Elaine if we could for just a quick moment. Elaine Cobb on the scene for us as well in Paris. What else do you know, Elaine?
Jeff, the Deputy Mayor of Paris has said that Notre Dame has suffered colossal damages, and it seems that the main thrust of work of the firefighters now is to try to save any artworks that they possibly can inside the church. The whole roof, the whole main area is down. What is still standing are the two towers in the front, those twin square towers, and some of the very back of the church, which faces onto the river at the back of the Ile de la Cité. But the entire center, the top half at least, is gone, and the fire now inside the structure, and therefore hitting all of the pews, all of the wooden artworks, all of the wooden framing inside the building, because of course it's a very large cathedral, and it's in that traditional form with, they've got a wooden raised area surrounded by wooden panels for the choir and for the priests and for smaller services. So an awful lot of wood inside to catch fire and to spread the fire.
All right, Elaine, thank you very much. And as the sun continues to set here in Paris, it's going to create a sensational and tragic scene in the sky as the flames continue moving up into the air and as firefighters continue to do their work. To update you now on what has been happening and what you've been watching transpire here, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris has been largely destroyed today by flames that broke out during a massive renovation project. Notre Dame dates back to the 12th century. It is the most visited landmark in Paris. It is one of the most famous churches. It is one of the most famous landmarks in the world. Within the last hour, the spire of Notre Dame collapsed. The roof of Notre Dame, most of the roof of Notre Dame has collapsed. We are still watching all of these pictures come in from Paris as a spokesperson, unfortunately, from the Notre Dame Cathedral tells us everything is burning. We are going to have much more on your local news on this CBS station on this fire in Paris on our digital network CBSN, and we'll be back with a full report on what is happening in Paris this afternoon on the CBS Evening News. Until then, I'm Jeff Glor here in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.